sister and a buddy who I grew up with. Imagine that. You know, Mr. Franco, will you grab that gentleman with the striped thing? And then I don't know if this thing's ready or not. Doesn't matter. All right. Should I get started? Oh, yeah, do an introduction. Do you need the microphone? Should I stay on the stage or not? Yeah, I'll stand over here. How about that?
Move this over a little bit so it looks a little bit more efficient. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's kind of heavy.
Good afternoon. We are blessed to have a Blinn alumnus today as our guest speaker. Preston Moore is a graduate of Bryan High School. After high school, he attended Blinn College before transferring to Texas A&M, where he graduated with a degree in communication and business. Today, a successful businessman, he lives in Philadelphia with his wife, Sarah, and their young son, Austin. Today's talk is labeled, How to Pick Your Perfect College Major. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston Moore.
Yeah! Man, how about that introduction? Mr. Franke, he's hooked me up with a few extra credit points and some really good grades, too, so thank you for that. You know, it's good to be back home. I was up this morning about 6 in the morning, and I went to the Starbucks on University Drive to practice this thing. I figured there'd be at least 200 people here. But it's funny because growing up, I rebelled against everything. If you told me it was the sky was blue, I'd argue with you that it wasn't. And so I intentionally, when I left to come over here for this morning to get set up, I intentionally drove down 29th Street, and I got the radio cranked up with Kesha's new song that might be called Prayin'. It's this really great ballad. I'm in my brother-in-law's 4-door, 1-ton Ford pickup truck. I pass my mom's old hair salon on 29th and Carter Creek. I drive by Bryan High School, where I barely graduated, and I just start crying with gratitude because all I ever wanted to do was get out of Bryan College Station. All I wanted to do is get away from all the lessons and the what I felt as parental control. And here I am, 10 years, I guess probably 20 years now. I've lived in Philadelphia for the last 8, and just grateful to be here, grateful for Blinn and everything I learned here. So this is my alma mater. I was here for 4 years. Now think about that for a second. 4 years at a 2-year college. I was a stellar student. I actually went the long way around, so I used to get in a lot of trouble when I was younger, so I didn't start going to classes here until I was about 22 years old. And a friend of mine told me about the student government, which I had no clue that even existed. I held a position of Sergeant at Arms, Vice President. I was even Mr. Blinn twice, 2 years running. And you know what that means when you're Mr. Blinn twice, 2 years in a row? Absolutely nothing. It was so easy. All I had to do was write my name down on a registration slip and get about 5 people to vote for me, and I was Mr. Blinn. It was just an easy way to pad my resume. One of the cool things about Blinn, I think, is most people look at Blinn as like a pit stop. Nobody aspires to go to Blinn College at the Bryan campus. Everybody's trying to transfer somewhere else, yet there's so many great opportunities here, whether it's for a club or an organization to participate, and if someone's motivated enough to make some real change that's going to last into the future. And if anything, it's just showing participation to pad your resume to move on to a bigger 4-year college. But I'm really grateful for the opportunity that Blinn gave me and all the people that helped. Now, I'm going to talk to you guys about how to pick the perfect college major, the most important lesson that I ever learned when it comes to deciding on a career path, and then a number of life lessons that I've learned over the last 20 years of being out of high school. Now, here's the reality. I'm an average dude. I've never really been great at anything. I've been good at a few things, but never really excelled. I don't have a photographic memory. I'm not a stellar student. I don't read well. Sometimes my spelling is so bad, even spell check doesn't know what I'm trying to say. which is true. I actually experienced that trying to figure out this, type this talk up. But I think the fact that I went to college and graduated is an absolute miracle. When I was younger, I used to get into a lot of trouble. My senior year in high school, not only did I cheat my way through high school, in Algebra 2, the only way I passed the class on the final was I had a buddy across the classroom giving me the answers with gang signs, basically. And it was... I guess I thought I was being smart, right? Like work smarter, not harder, you know. But the other thing that's significant that happened to me my senior year in high school is that I got arrested for a DWI. I was 17 years old. As far as I was concerned, I was just doing what college or I guess high school students do, and I was just unlucky. What I didn't understand at that time was what drug and alcohol addiction was about. I didn't understand what was going to happen to me in the next 3 years of my life. I didn't understand that not everybody ended up where I ended up. And so I remember graduating high school and I got my real estate license. I was 18 years old and I attempted to take a couple classes here at Blinn. And being that my number one goal when I enrolled here was to meet chicks, you can imagine I didn't do very well. Mr. Franke actually just reminded me of a time when I walked through his video of his Eminem karaoke music video that he was making, and I had no clue that I was even walking through the middle of his screen. But I got my real estate license. I started making really good money as a youngster, but what happened was 2 years after that arrest as a senior in high school, I got a drug possession, so I got arrested for the second time. And then a year after that, I got another DWI, and 4 months after that, I got another drug possession. I remember I was 20 years old at this time, and I was sitting in the back of that police car with no padding. It's a plastic police car. My hands are cuffed behind me, and the thing that was going through my mind wasn't how big of a disappointment I might have been to my parents or how bad my criminal record was going to be. It was finally someone's going to help me with my drug and alcohol use. And the thing is that I never thought that I drank or used drugs abnormally. I never actually considered stopping. Even after that last arrest, it was more about I'm not going to make those mistakes again. I was really confused at how my life could be so together in some ways. For example, being in real estate and showing up to work every day and having a lot of interactions with professionals and business owners, and my parents of my friends really liked me. But yet in this other area, I was so dysfunctional. And so the reason why I tell you this is after that last arrest, I was forced to go to drug rehab. I went to 12-step meetings. I got a sponsor. I had a support group. I'm still very active in that community today. So I am today what you call a person in long-term recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. And what that means is I haven't used drugs or alcohol in over 16 years. And the reason that that's important is because when I was younger, I didn't know anybody that I looked up to or that I thought was cool and hip that didn't drink or do drugs. The only people that I knew that didn't drink or do drugs were, let's say, a born-again Christian that was super religious or someone that was super square, which I didn't want to be either one because I was too cool for school. But nobody really shared with me about recovery or drug and alcohol addiction. So if you know somebody that's struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, or a friend or family or yourself has a challenge in that area, I will make it official that you can give my number out, you can look me up on Facebook, you can tell anybody that you need to tell that I have experience with that, because it's an absolute honor to help with people around that topic, and it actually helps me continue down my road of recovery. Now, so let me talk to you a little bit about my time here. So when I first started at Blinn, I started with one class a semester. And I remember people making fun of me and saying, "You're going to be 30 years old before you graduate." And I said, "Yes, I'm going to be 30, but I'd prefer to be 30 with a degree instead of without. And so I started with one class a semester, and I actually went to school for a year and a half before I got one college credit. And that was because I was learning all the things I was supposed to learn in high school when I was too cool for school. But what also needed to happen for me is I didn't think I was very smart. I wasn't sure if I could go to college. And so I needed to get some experience under my belt and get a couple A's and B's to start to build my confidence. And so I went to school for a year and a half before I got one college credit. I joined the student government. And I remember this was about 3.5 years into my college career. And I remember the pressure starting to build about picking a college major, because everybody from my uncle to my advisors and my professors, everybody was saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to major in? Where are you going to go to school? And so I felt that pressure starting to mount, because for me, I was paying as I went for school. I was working full time. I was taking every possible class you could take that would transfer to a major university. And when it come to picking a major, I didn't know what I want to do. Did I want to pick based on how much money I want to make in the future? Do I want to pick a degree that's going to give me the best chance to get a job? Do I want to go pick a school for the prestige because I think it's going to look good on my resume? I really didn't know. So luckily, being in the student government, we got to go on trips. So we would go, I can't remember if it was Florida or New York. We went to a trip, and I remember going to this lecture, much like this, and it was about how to pick a college major. And this is what the guy said. He said, you have an 80% chance of not working in the field you major in. So, to put this in perspective, 8 out of 10 of your friends today, in 3 to 5 years after college, they will not be working in the field that they majored in. Right? 20%, 2 of y'all that may be lucky enough will not only major in something that you're interested in, but you will work in that same field forever. So this was a revelation, because I didn't understand that the discrepancy was that big. But what it did was it took the pressure off for me. I didn't feel as much pressure to go to the right school or pick the right major or take the right classes. I thought to myself, if I've got an 80% chance of not even working in the field that I majored in, what does it even matter what topic I pick or what major? Or for that matter, what school do I go to? So he said, pick something that you're interested in. Pick something that you love. Pick something that you're passionate about. Because what will happen if you pick something based on what you're interested in, not only do you enjoy school, you're going to do better in your classes. You're going to make better grades. If you're picking something based on what you think you should be doing, or maybe following your parents' or advisors' advice, you might just be having to trudge through school and trudge through classes with no interest and not do as well. So let me give you some real-life examples. My wife, Sarah, she is the most beautiful, charismatic, smartest woman that I've ever met. And she even has an English accent. Now, she does have an English accent, which is 100% true, but this is being recorded, and she's going to watch this, so I got to make sure I say some nice things about her. But my wife couldn't be more opposite than me. She was extremely well-educated. She was very smart. She went to a grammar school in England where you had to be in the top 2% of the entire United Kingdom to go to this school. She went to Sheffield University, which is what they call a red brick university. It's not quite Ivy League, but maybe just a little bit below, like a Vanderbilt or a Cornell, something like that. And she majored in linguistics. She started out in law, hated it, majored in linguistics. She came to America to work. She worked for Chevron briefly, hated it, came to A&M to do her master's, and she majored in comparative literature and Hispanic studies. She wanted to be a travel writer. She wanted to travel around the world, write, maybe be a professor of some sort. But the thing is that halfway through her degree plan, she realized she didn't want to be a professor. She wasn't even sure if she wanted to be a travel writer. So when we graduated college, she got a job in retail. They moved us up to Philadelphia, which we live today. And today she's a life coach. She works in personal development, working with women one-to-one to figure out what it is they want to do with the rest of their life or what makes them happy. She does online retreats and online courses. She's got 2 degrees, very well educated, but doesn't work in the field of her major. Another friend of mine he's more than a friend. He's a relative, my cousin Barry. Now, my Uncle Don, he is a Aggie through and through. He raised his children, at least his son, to go to Texas A&M. Barry was very intelligent. He skipped the first grade, and he graduated early. And I think when it was all said and done, I think it took him 8 years to finish his bachelor's at Texas A&M. Now, what was funny about that is I was the troublemaker, and he was the good cousin. And it still took him longer than it took for me to get out of school. But here's what's interesting about that is, by the time it was all said and done, he got a degree in turf management from the agriculture department, and he became a youth minister for a little bit. Today he's in commercial real estate, and he's a city council member. Another guy that's not working in the field that he majored in. My cousin Eva, this is a pretty good lesson. The only thing my uncle is not happy with his sweet daughter is that she went to the University of Texas. My uncle says, "How did that happen?" And she says, "Well, Dad, you spent all your time with Barry. You didn't even have anything to do with me when it came to colleges, so I figured I'd just stay home and I'd go to UT." But here's what she did. She took my uncle's advice, which was really good practical advice, and that was go to the business school, major in marketing, because no matter what you do, marketing is a great degree to have, which is true. So she went to school at University of Texas in marketing. But here's the thing, she wasn't really interested in it. She was smart, but she didn't do the greatest. It wasn't like she did terribly, but she didn't do well enough that when she graduated and she wanted to pursue what she was really interested in was medicine, she couldn't get into any of the med schools. She couldn't go into the degree or I think she looked at physical therapy as well. She couldn't get in because her grades weren't good enough. And part of the reason was because she picked a major that was practical, not something that she was interested in. Today, she's in her early 30s. She's in pharmacy school, which she did kind of go the long way around getting into medicine. But if she would have potentially made a bit of a shift earlier, she could have gone down the path that she was really interested in. Another buddy of mine, Kevin, he's known since he was in high school he wanted to be a chiropractor. He did his undergrad in one of the sciences, went to chiropractic school. He lives in Austin. He's a chiropractor. He loves what he does. He's part of the 20%. He knew from an early age. Unlike my friend Dave, he knew since he was 8 years old that he wanted to be a meteorologist, a weatherman. He was in the meteorology club. He graduated at the top of his class. He got a dream job right out of high school as an assistant meteorologist, which is a weatherman on TV. But he worked for the TV station for 2 years and absolutely hated it. So he ended up going to work for my uncle. Now he sells advertising in the newspaper industry. He loves it, and he loves school. He did very, very well. But he's another one that picked something that he's super interested in and realized 2 to 3 years down the road that thing that he loves so much, it didn't really translate into a professional career. And then you've got someone like myself. Now, since I got my real estate license out of high school, I did 10 years of real estate. I was looking at going into the business school. Quite honestly, I wasn't sure if I even liked business enough to major in it. I was a bit intimidated. As some of you know, the business school can be sometimes hard to get into at Texas A&M. So I figured after this lecture, I was like, well, what am I good at? What am I interested in? And so I knew that no matter what I did, whether I was in sales, whether I was in teaching, that I was going to be talking to people. So I majored in communication and minored in business. Now, after I was in school a little bit, I realized I did like business quite a lot. I wish I would have taken more classes in business, but when I graduated, I was 28 years old. I was ready to get out. I didn't want to take another victory lap for a year to get a bachelor's in business. But today, you're looking at it. I've been in sales. I've done all kind of different things, but everything has evolved around communication, teaching, training, speaking. One day I'll actually get paid for this, and I don't have to come here for free as much anymore. So look, here's the takeaway. Here's the takeaway for that 80-20 rule when it comes to picking a major. Find what you like. Now, I can imagine you going to tell your parents, you know, Mom, Dad, I know you had big plans for me. You wanted me to become a lawyer or a doctor or a professor. But instead of doing that, I think I'm going to transfer to Northwestern Tennessee University and major in underwater basket weaving because, Mom, that is what I'm passionate about. Now, you can imagine what they would think about that. So whether it's Czechoslovakian literature or women's studies or underwater basket weaving, whatever that is, I guess my big disclaimer here is if you choose to follow your passion, if you choose to follow something that you're interested in, and people in that industry make, let's say, $32,000 a year as an expert, when you graduate, you need to be okay making $32,000 a year if you're going to major in Czechoslovakian literature and you want to work in that field. Right? Actually, you need to be okay making $19,000 a year because when you first graduate, you're going to be doing all the work that the experts don't like doing. And you have to work your way up to $32,000 a year. And if you're 100% happy with that, that is absolutely amazing. But I think one of the interesting things is I fall into the same category of, I was told, imagine this, I was told that if I went to Texas A&M, that I would never go without a job. I was told that Texas A&M was the greatest university in the world and the Aggie Network would take care of me forever. I thought that just because I graduated that people would lay out these jobs and career making $100,000 a year. Can you imagine? So yes, when I graduated, what I didn't realize is by graduating college, I would have the privilege of applying for jobs with the hope to start at the bottom. Now, the good thing of having a degree, whether it's from Texas A&M or Sam Houston State or Northeastern Tennessee University, a lot of times if you have a degree, you get to apply for a different grouping of careers, and your ceiling is higher. Okay? That doesn't mean that when you first start out that magically you're going to be above someone that maybe doesn't have a degree. But this is what happens when you finish. When I graduated college and I went to get my first, when I did my first interview with the HR manager, the only person that cared that I went to Texas A&M was me. Because when I was hired, I was with about 40 different sales reps in Houston, and they were from all over the place. All they wanted to know was, did you graduate? Can you finish? Can you set a goal and complete the goal? The other part of college that I didn't really realize, I actually had what'd she be? Maybe my niece, second, third cousin. She's 13 years old, and she says, how many times have you used the Pythagorean theorem, I think maybe that's it, Pythagorean theorem, since you've graduated high school? And the answer to that is never. And she says, so why do I need to know it? Well, first off, it's because the people that determine whether you graduate says so. But as a boss, as a business owner, as an HR manager, what people want to know is, if I give you some work that you don't like and that you're not interested in, can you perform? Will you do a good job, or are you only going to do a good job in the things you're interested in? Because once we're out of here, everything changes. Nobody cares about Nobody cares about your background or your living situation or your religion or your school. Now, if you're part of the, let me rephrase, most of the time, people don't care as much. Yes, your mother cares. But in the overall scheme of things, it doesn't carry as much weight as I thought it did. So if you're going to be in college, pick something that you like. This is a good example. Here's a good example. When I was applying for jobs in Houston, this is an example of when I was grateful that I got a degree. This was 2008, 2009, one of the worst economies in the last 30 years. After I came to the realization that people weren't going to be rolling out the red carpet for me because I graduated from college, me and a buddy were looking for jobs at the same time. This guy, we graduated almost at the same time from high school. This guy could sell circles. He could work circles around me when it comes to sales. But I was applying for jobs that had a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 base plus commission with benefits. He was applying for jobs that were straight commission, 5 to 7 days a week. We both got jobs that we didn't necessarily like. We both ended up in situations neither one of us were planning. But my upside was much higher simply because I had that piece of paper. So if all you do is finish, that's good enough. Now, one good thing that you have here at Blinn is you have opportunity to participate. That if you go to a school like Texas A&M or Sam Houston State or some of these larger universities, you don't have as much opportunity to participate. So you take this as an opportunity to pad your resume, to experience some things, because it might make a really big difference or open yourself up to an industry that you may have been unexpected. Here's a couple of things that, life lessons that I've learned since I've been out of college. Tony Robbins has a really good perspective on stress, struggle, and fear. And what he says is that our brain is over 2 million years old, and our brain is not set up to make you happy, joyous, and free. He says our brain is set up for us to survive. So when a lion would jump out of the bush, we'd know to get away. But the thing is that lions, tigers, and bears are not going to be jumping out of the H building while we're walking to class. And so now that brain that is meant to keep us safe, what does it do? What does it occupy its time with? If you're anything like me, oftentimes it's on a constant worry loop, constant fear, constant concern, constant anxiety. What is it that I got to do today? I got a knot in my stomach. What am I going to do? I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda. That's what my brain is cycling through and doing. And so when you're in school and you've got what feels like the weight of the world on you to perform, to make the right decision, to make the right choices, to pick the right career path, to make sure that you don't waste your parents' money, right? What do we do? Well, I would argue, spend your time figuring out what makes you tick. Spend your time figuring out what makes you happy. Spend your time on self-awareness. Because if you don't know what you want, if you don't know what you like, how is anybody else going to know that? Spend your time on your EQ as opposed to your IQ. Now, IQ is basically set, so they say. However, if you spend your time on your emotional intelligence, that is, being able to identify how you feel, being able to communicate that to others. That's emotional quotient, EQ. It's also being able to understand how other people are feeling and be able to identify in a way that's productive. Studies show today that people that have a higher EQ are not only more successful in life and business, but they're more successful in groups, as leaders, as part of an organization, because anybody can talk speak into Google and figure out when the Battle of Bullhorn, I just make that up. Frankie can help me out with that, I don't know. Anybody can Google something and find out the answer. So if you spend your time figuring out what's important to you, how you feel, and being able to communicate that to others, as a whole, you can make massive change. And that is what hiring managers want to know. That is what business owners want to know. That is what people who are looking for someone to follow wants to know. What are your relationships like? How do you make them feel? Spend your time figuring out what you like. I've got a few notes here about spending your time learning what your inner voice is telling you. Some people call that intuition. Some people call that your gut. It's that little voice inside your head that is directing you as to, I'm moving in the right direction, or this is not going to be good. Spend your time learning what your gut is telling you. I think that the ability to do that comes over time. You don't always know what the right answer is. And quite frankly, a lot of times you learn a lot more from your failures than you do for your wins. So making the right decision may end up being the wrong decision in the long term, but the experience that you're going to gain is going to be vastly beneficial to you. Here's a couple of good ones. Find a spiritual practice. Learn to meditate. Find an activity that introduces you to you. And what I mean by that is that we're so used to drawing lines in the sand, right? So many people, whether it's politics or religion or what school you go to, everybody is looking for reasons to separate. And I would argue, look for reasons to be inclusive. And one way that's been extremely beneficial to me is to have a routine. So my routine in the morning is usually like a prayer, a meditation, a journal. Very similar at the end of the day. But what happens for me is at any given moment, I feel like a scared little boy. I don't know what to do. I'm never good enough. I'm not small enough. I don't have enough hair, which is true, but I don't need to be focusing on it. At any given moment, I'm worried about what I don't have. But if I will stick to the routine, that which brings me back to gratitude, the reality of where I'm at, who I am here, if I focus on what's right in front of me, I don't get so caught up. The pressure isn't so big. Instead of looking for reasons to separate me from you, I'm looking for ways to identify with you so we can work together. Get you a daily routine. Spend time not medicating, although that works too sometimes. Medicating is very good sometimes. Experiment. There are people that have the opinion to be a jack of all trades, and there are people that say become a specialist. Now, whatever's right for you, I'm not sure, but I would argue experiment with as many things as possible. Gain as much experience as you can in other industries. Do things that you're not sure if you like. Because when you experiment, not only are you might discover something that you're really passionate about, but you're also going to find out a lot of things that you don't like, which is a good thing, because if you never try, you're never going to learn the upside. Part of that is failing fast. Fail fast. The faster you can fail, the faster you know if you're on the right direction. I used to make fun of people who would have like 20 jobs in 3 years. I always thought of myself as a upstanding citizen because I could hold a job for 10 years. One could look at it that way, but one could also look at it as someone that is scared to try new things or doesn't like to get out of his comfort zone. The other thing is that as you're out of school for a little while, the economy has ups and downs. The job market is sometimes really, really good, and sometimes it's terrible. And so if you're a person that has a lot of experience in a lot of different industries, not only can you bring that experience into whatever career path that you are, but when things get tight and people start getting laid off, you might have a better chance of not getting laid off because you can do a lot more things than the average specialist. So try new things, fail fast, get as much experience as you can. Be willing to work for free. Holy smokes! That is not something that I wanted to hear when I was coming up. I thought, my mother can attest to this, I wanted to be paid to mow the yard. I wanted to be paid to take out the trash. I wanted to be paid to do the dishes. I wanted to be paid for everything. Could that be because I was entitled? Maybe. Maybe just like I expected for people to roll out the red carpet for me. But be willing to work for free. There's no better time to work for free than when you're young, before you have a bunch of bills and debt and responsibilities build up. If you have somebody or know somebody that's doing something that you might be interested in, reach out to them. Ask them, what can I do for you? Can I come work for you for free? I'll do anything. Whether that's doing internships while you're in college or when you graduate college, being a roommate with 8 other people in a house, or living with your parents and working a part-time job just so you can go do things for free. Get the experience, because the closer you can get to the sun, the better. The more people that you can get around that are extremely successful or doing something that you're really interested in, the better. Here's one. Live small. Live small as long as you can. Now that sounds a little bit odd, especially if you ask my wife, who loves to think big. Here's what I mean by live small. I spent so much time thinking about all the things that I wanted. Thinking about all the things I wanted to buy, the type of car I was driving, where I lived, the type of clothes that I had. If you can live small, take on as little debt as possible, keep your bills down. Instead of buying coffee from the coffee shop, brew your own coffee and bring it in a thermos. Bring your lunch to work. Live small. The longer you can keep your bills and expenses down, the more opportunity you have to experiment. Remember I was talking about working for free? One of the greatest jobs I ever had was waiting tables. One of the best paying jobs out there. I could come and go as I please. You could always find somebody to pick up shifts. But if you keep your expenses down, you can do something like wait tables or work for Blinn or whatever else you want to do, and spend your time experimenting. Take out as little student loans as possible. Now, here's the thing about that. I'm extremely grateful to Blinn because I worked my way through Blinn. I would work and pay semester cash until I transferred to A&M, where I took out student loans. But where I live in Philadelphia, there's so many colleges up there. Many of them are private, but these students are coming out of college with $75,000, $100,000, $200,000 in student loan debt. And the career path that they want to go into, they'll never make more than $60,000 a year. Now, $60,000 is a lot of money. But if your student loan payment is $2,000, how much pressure do you think that that's going to put on you? On top of wanting to buy a new car and start a family and buy a house. If you've got all that pressure on you, it doesn't give you very many options. So if you're lucky enough to have someone else pay for your college, or spend your time getting scholarships, any way that you can possibly pay for your college and not take out student loan debt, that is probably some of the best advice that someone has given me. To give you an example, when my wife and I graduated college, we said, hey, instead of us going and buying new cars and getting a nice house, let's live on the same budget we lived while we were in college. So I brought my lunch to work every day, and I brewed my Starbucks coffee and put it in a thermos, while all my friends that I was working with was going out to eat for lunch every day. We paid off $25,000 of student loan debt in 9 months. I saved up $8,000 cash to buy a wedding ring for my wife, which luckily she said yes. Could have something to do with the ring. Over the next 2 years, we paid off another $30,000 in student loan debt. So we were lucky enough to get out from under that debt very early, but I run into so many people that they say, I wish I could do that, but my loan payment's $1,500. People are even, before they even get married, the question is, how much debt do you have before I say yes? So do as much as you can to live small and take out as little loans as possible. Here's a good one. Now, understand, some of my opinions are 100% biased, and by some I mean all are 100% biased. Learn to sell. Learn to sell. I don't care if you want to be in sales, but at least learn to sell, because I would argue that every single person in this room is a salesperson. You're either selling me on yes, or I'm selling you on no. You're either selling the committee or the higher-ups on why you're right, or they're selling you on why you're wrong. If you can learn to sell, even if it's the most uncomfortable thing that you could think of doing, that is going to be skills that you can take into whatever path you go, whether you're in administration, whether you're a doctor or a nurse, whether you're in agriculture. Learn to sell. One of the best skills that you could ever learn. Triple down on your strengths. Instead of worrying so much about what you're not good at and trying to do better, triple down on your strengths. When you think of the same idea or concept about picking something you're interested in, how many people want to work on something they're not good at? But if you think of what you are good at, that gives you energy. That's fun. So triple down on your strengths. Don't worry about your weaknesses. When you get into business or into the professional world, hopefully you can outsource your weaknesses. Focus on your strengths. It's a lot better. It's a lot more fun. This is probably one of the most, this is the most impactful things that I ever did in my life. Study abroad. If you have an opportunity to study abroad, take it. This stemmed from me not being a very good Spanish student. Remember I told you I cheated my way through high school? I attempted to take Spanish 1 twice here at Blinn. I would always make it halfway through. I would have an A or a B halfway through, and then all of a sudden my grades would go into the pits. And that's because I couldn't carry through all the stuff and remember all the stuff that I was supposed to learn at the beginning of the semester, so I ended up dropping it. So I knew I wanted to go to a Spanish-speaking country, and instead of taking Spanish 1 and 2 here and 3 and 4 abroad, I did all 14 hours abroad. And one thing that I did that I don't necessarily recommend it for everybody, but it was right for me, instead of going with my school, which means a group of Blinn students or a group of A&M students or a group of people that is from your area, instead of all going down and doing a study abroad together, I went solo. I went by myself. I went to three different language institutes in 5 countries. It was part of the reason why it was the greatest experience of my life. It was the first time I got some real perspective on what it's like to live in America. And I'll tell you what happened. I was driving down the highway, and I was staying with the lady who I was living with. And I looked up, and on the side of this cliff looked like a junkyard. And I said, "Oh, what is that? Is that the dump?" She says, "No, that's the shanty towns." Now understand, we're in Santiago, Chile, the capital, the nation's capital, in technically I guess it would be considered a first world country. I mean, there was skyscrapers everywhere. For all intended purposes, it looked like we were in Europe. But yet, if you don't have enough money, this is her words. She said, if you're working and you get injured, and you can't pay your bills, they kick you out of your house, you and your family. And if you have nowhere to live, you go up to the shanty town and you find an empty place, and then you build a shelter around you. And I said, well, what about disability insurance? What about welfare? She says to me, we don't have that here. That's like the realization of how grateful I am, how beneficial we are to even whatever your life situation is. Even our poorest people in America have it better than 95% of the rest of the world. I'm not saying that you should be grateful, but I'm saying that it could always be worse. In my job, I'm in and out of, I'm in flooring sales, and I'm in and out of West Philly, you know, where Will Smith was born and raised. You remember that one? And I go in these houses, and these are loving families, but they have plastic furniture. And I don't mean furniture with plastic on it. I mean plastic yard furniture. And they're sitting down for dinner, and their dinner is hot dogs with ketchup. And I don't mean hot dogs with buns. I'm saying hot dogs only with ketchup. And they're fingers crossed that they can afford some new flooring. Everything is about perspective. A mentor told me, he said, the answer is always to do more for others, not less. So whatever you've got to do to keep perspective and remain grateful, do it. Study abroad was super impactful for me. Don't skip semesters in math. How many of you are good in math? I'll tell you what, if you skip a semester, let me rephrase. If I skipped a semester in math, I couldn't remember what I did, so I'd end up having to take the class over again. So from the time I started in 2002 with my remedial classes, and I took 3 of them, I went all 3 remedial classes, Algebra 1, all the way through Calculus 2. If you're not good at math, don't skip semesters. If you are good at math, I'm a little resentful. Let's see. My curve strategy. Anybody have a curve strategy in here? Any students? Here's my curve strategy. My goal was not to make an A in class. My goal was to be in the top 10 or 15% of my class. Because my theory was, being that I was a non-traditional student, a little older, all these youngsters, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, would go out and party, and they wouldn't study as much. So if I could be at the front end of that curve, when the professor, if he had to, curved, I would curve up to an A or curve up to a B. Now, in college, that's a great strategy, but in life, there is no curves. If you get let go, they don't consider your mortgage or your family. They don't consider where you come from. If things get tight, there's not a whole lot of curve left when you get out of college. So use it for what it is. I'm going to say a couple of quick things and wrap up. So, you hear me talk about perspective. You hear me talk about figure out what's important to you. You hear me talk about, well, maybe I haven't said it yet, but life is tough, especially as you get older. Relationships, keeping your marriage together, raising children, being able to set a path of the type of life that you want professionally. Going with the ups and downs of layoffs and economy and who's in the White House and what's going on in our society. Life is tough. But here's some of the best advice I ever got. There's a gentleman by the name of Trevor Moab. He works with a lot of professional athletes, and he says instead of worrying so much about being positive, focus on less negative. So instead of having big, huge, audacious goals or having the law of attraction, if any of you have ever seen The Secret, it's about attracting what it is that you want. Instead of focusing so much on positivity, if you just focus on getting rid of the negative, watch less of the news, don't look at so much negative stuff on social media. Focus on things that are more neutral. It's not necessarily good or bad, it's what you bring into your life. Focus less on positivity and more on what's... Did I say that right? That's not right. Focus less on the negative because it takes a lot of the pressure off and it helps keep your perspective. This is a fun one. My wife likes this one. If you want things to change, change you. Let me explain. Whether it was when I was getting in trouble as a youngster or while I was in college and I was blaming, let's say, my parents or my professors or my situation or my wife, I have a tendency to blame others for my situation. And when my wife and I are not getting along, she's telling me, if you would have just done it this way, we wouldn't be having this argument. And I would say, no, 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 no. If you would have done it this way, we wouldn't be in an argument. But the reality is the only thing that I have the ability to change is me. And if I change me, you must change in order to deal with me. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to relationships, if you've got somebody that you're arguing with or that pushes your buttons or you don't get along with, the instinct is to focus on all the things that they are or are not doing. But if you change, the things that used to bother you and affect you no longer do. Therefore, they must change in order to deal with you. So if you want things to change, change you. I would much rather my wife do the work so I don't have to do as much, but she knows that lesson and she doesn't hesitate to throw it in my face occasionally. This is from my girl Oprah, one of my favorite mentors. Anybody like Super Soul Sunday? I love that show. So Oprah says, instead of worrying about carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, instead of worrying about all the things you have to do, she's a huge proponent of education. And she says, instead of worrying about what you're going to major in and what your career is and what you're going to make in that class, do the next right thing. Focus on what's in front of you. That has a lot to do with perspective. It has a lot to do with self-awareness and being aware of what's going on with you. Do the next right thing. Do what's in front of you, because the reality is, if you're worried about where you're going to get into school or worried about how your semester is going to work out, if you just focus on the next class or the next project or the next final, things typically work out way better than you can imagine. There's no point in worrying about a bunch of things you can't change. Now I'm going to hang around and answer any questions at the end, but I want to leave you with this. There's a couple of things I want to leave you with. Number one, everything is subject to revision, especially what I know about the truth. Everything is subject to revision, especially what I know about the truth. And what that means is that my truth has changed. Your truth will change. What I thought was true when I was 16 was different than when I was 22, that was different when I was 32, and will be different 5 years from now. Truth changes. So I'll leave you with this. If you're wondering, how do I pick the perfect college major? How do I know I'm on the right track? How do I know what I should be doing? Ask yourself this, and do it consistently. If I could do anything in the world and money was not an issue, I knew I couldn't fail, what would I do? If I could do anything in the world, money was not an issue, and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would you do? If you answer that question on a consistent basis, whether it's daily, monthly, yearly, although your truth might change, although what's important to you at 18 might be different than when you're 24, but if you consistently ask yourself that question, you can rest assured that you're going to be at least going in the right direction. I want to thank you guys for coming. I want to thank you guys for letting me be of service. And Mr. Franke, thanks for setting this up. I really appreciate it. And that's all I got. Thanks for coming. Ooh. Yeah! Good thing I invited my family. That was